So welcome to part 4 of the Chocolate Wars. Last time we met Leon, who was one of the teachers, and not a very nice guy. He tormented another student, which was pretty awful. And he made the rest of the class realize that he's unpredictable and kind of out to get them. And no matter what they do, they're going to do it wrong. And of course, our main character, Jerry Renault, is in that class. So he's finding out about Leon. Now, what I want you to do today is fill out Cornell notes. And you will find them in the assignment. So they're linked to the assignment for today. And Cornell notes look like this. I've adapted it a little bit, so it's kind of a simpler form. But I'll show you what I want you to do while we are reading. And I want you to put down the topic objective, our essential question, and then any questions that you have about the reading, and then any notes and quotations from the text that might help you with the reading. And I think this way we'll get to know a little bit more about our characters, we'll get to know a little bit more about the main plot of the story, and we're going to work into more and more complicated understanding of the text that we're reading this way. So we're going to start with chapter 7. And today with our Cornell notes, what we're really looking at for our essential question is what is occurring between Leon, Archie, and Jerry Renault. Okay, so we're really looking at a basic plot issue right now. And we'll ask some questions along the way and take some notes at the same time. So, chapter 7. What are you doing, Emile? Archie asked, amusement in his voice. The amusement was there because it was obvious that Emile Janza was doing. He was siphoning gas from a car, watching it flow into a glass jug. Okay, here's our first vocab word, siphoning. And let's go to our vocabulary sheet. This is part 4, siphoning. And that means he is pulling out. He is extracting. He is draining. Oops, I spelled that wrong. He is draining gas from a car. And more than likely illegally, right? Which is why Archie is laughing. Emile giggled. He, too, was amused that Archie should have discovered him performing such an act. I'm getting my gas for the week, Emile said. The car, parked at the far end of the school's parking lot, belonged to a senior by the name of Carlson. What would you do, Emile, if Carlson came along and saw you stealing his gas? Archie asked, although he knew the answer. Emile didn't bother to reply. He grinned knowingly at Archie. Carlson wouldn't do anything about it at all. He was thin, mild kid who hated getting involved in messes. Not too many people defied Emile Janza anyway. Whether they were fat or skinny, mild or not, Emile was a brute, which was kind of funny because he didn't look like a brute. He wasn't big or overly strong. In fact, he was small for a tackle on the football team, but he was an animal, and he didn't play by the rules, not if he could help it. His small eyes were embedded in pale flesh, eyes that seldom smiled despite the giggle and the grin that sometimes flashed across his face, especially when he knew he was reaching people. That's what Emile Janza called it, reaching people. Like whistling softly in class so that it got on the teacher's nerves, a barely perceptible whistle that could drive a teacher up the wall. That's why Emile Janza reversed the usual process. Wise guys usually sat in back. Emile didn't. He chose seats near the front where he'd be in better position to harass the teacher, whistling, grunting, belching, tapping his foot, stirring restlessly, sniffling. Hell, if you did that kind of stuff from the back of the room, the teacher wouldn't notice. But Emile didn't harass only teachers. He found that the world was full of willing victims, especially kids his own age. He had discovered a truth early in life, in the 4th grade, in fact. Nobody wanted trouble. No one wanted to make trouble. No one wanted a showdown. The knowledge was a revelation. It opened doors. You could take a kid's lunch or even his lunch money, and nothing usually happened because most kids wanted peace at any price. Of course, you had to choose your victims carefully because there were exceptions. Those who protested found that it was easier to let Emil have his way. Who wanted to get hurt? Later, Emil stumbled upon another truth, although it was hard to put into words. He found that people had a fear of being embarrassed or humiliated, of being singled out for special attention, like in a bus. You could call out to a kid, especially one who blushes easily, and say, "Geez, you got bad breath, know that? Don't you ever brush your teeth?" Even if the kid had the sweetest breath in the world. Or, "Did you lay a fart, kid? What a dirty thing to do." Softly, but loud enough for everybody to hear. Stuff like that, in the cafeteria, during lunch, in study class. But it was better in public places with strabgers nearby, especially girls. I do not know what strabgers is. That we're going to put that on our vocab list, and we're going to have to look it up because I have no idea what that is. Strabgers. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be stragglers. Let's look it up. Definition of, stragglers. Yeah, that is not a word. So look at that. We have an error in our reading. All right. Oops. Where'd it go? Okay. Stragglers, probably. That's when the kids squirmed. As a result, people went around being not extra nice to Emil Janza, and Emil basked in that treatment. Emil was not stupid, but he was not exactly bright in class. However, he managed to squeak by, no F's, only a couple of D's, all of which satisfied his father, whom Emil regarded as stupid, and whose major dream was to have his son graduate from a fancy private school like Trinity. His father didn't know how cruddy the place was. "Emil, you're a beautiful person," Archie said, as Emil, satisfied with the overflowing glass jug, carefully screwed the cap of the gas tank on. Emil looked up suspiciously, on guard. He was never sure whether Archie Costello was serious or not. Emil never fooled around with Archie. In fact, Archie was one of the few people in the world Emil respected, maybe even feared Archie and the Vigils. "Did you say beautiful?" Archie laughed. "I mean, Emil, you're something special. Who else would siphon gas in the middle of the day, out in the open like this? Beautiful." Emil smiled at Archie, suddenly wistful. He wished he could share with Archie some of the other stuff, but he couldn't. Somehow it was too private, but often he wanted to tell people about it, how he got a kick out of things. For instance, when he went to the John at school, he seldom flushed the toilet and got a kick out of picturing the next kid who'd go in and find a mess in the bowl. Crazy. And if he told anybody, it would be hard to explain. Like how he sometimes felt actually horny when he roughed housed a kid or tackled a guy viciously in football and gave him an extra jab when he had him on the ground. How could you tell anybody about that? This guy's messed up. And yet he felt that Archie would understand. Birds of a feather, that was it. Despite that picture, the picture that haunted his life, Archie began to walk away. "Hey, Archie, where are you going?" "I don't want to be an accessory, Emil." Okay, there's our second word, accessory. Accessory. This is something that supports and is added to. So there are a couple of different ways you can use the word accessory. You can be an accessory to a crime, and that's what Archie was referring to. He doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to get in trouble for what Richie's doing. Emil, what Emil is doing, because then he'll be an accessory to this crime of Emil stealing gas. An accessory is also something that you can wear, right? Like a watch, an accessory to your wardrobe, right? It's an addition to it. It accents it. Emil laughed. "Carlson's not going to press charges." Archie shook his head in admiration. "Beautiful," he said. "Hey, Archie, how about the picture?" "Yes, Emil, how about the picture?" "You know what I mean." "Beautiful," Archie said, walking away quickly now, wanting to keep Emil Janza sweating about the picture. Actually, Archie hated people like Janza, even though he could admire their handiwork. People like Janza were animals, but they came in handy, Janza and the picture, like money in the bank. Emil Janza watched the departing figure of Archie Costello. Someday he'd be like Archie, cool, a member of the Vigils. Emil kicked at the rear tire of Carlson's car. Somehow he was disappointed that Carlson hadn't caught him siphoning the gas. All right, we're going to go to our Cornell notes a minute. What questions do we have? Well, my question is, what picture does Archie have of Emil? Right? Now, go back to the story, and we know right here, hey Archie, how about the picture? How about the picture? You know what I mean, right? So that's our textual support right there. So Emil asks Archie, how about the picture? But neither of the students tell us what that means. So as readers, we're not sure. My other question is, Archie doesn't like Emil, but Emil likes Archie. Why? Right? And I want you to answer this question. Why do you think that is? And then if we go back to our essential question, what is occurring between Leon, Archie, and Jerry? We don't even see Jerry. In this chapter. Why is it still important? What do we learn? And here I want to talk about Archie is blackmailing Emil. Right? He says, what about the picture? Well, we don't know what that picture is. Emil, I don't know. He's worried about it. So Archie is blackmailing Emil. Will he do the same to Jerry? So that's my question. That's how I think they tie together. All right, let's read the next chapter. Whoops, sorry. And that is chapter 8. The goober was beautiful when he ran. So let's refer a minute back to Goober in the last part 3. Remember, he had to unscrew all the little screws in that classroom, and he didn't like it. So that's who he is. His long arms and legs moved flowingly and flawlessly, his body floating as if his feet weren't touching the ground. When he ran, he forgot about his acne and his awkwardness and the shyness that paralyzed him when a girl looked his way. Even his thoughts became sharper and things were simple and uncomplicated. He could solve math problems when he ran or memorize football play patterns. Often he rose early in the morning before anyone else and poured himself liquid through the sunrise streets, and everything seemed beautiful. Everything in its proper orbit, nothing impossible, the entire world attainable. When he ran, he even loved the pain, the hurt of the running, the burning in his lungs, and the spasms that sometimes gripped his calves. He loved it because he knew he could endure the pain and even go beyond it. He had never pushed himself to the limit, but he felt all this reserved strength inside of him. More than strength, actually, determination. And it sang in him as he ran, his heart pumping blood joyfully through his body. He'd gone out for football, and there was a good feeling when he caught one of Jerry Renault's passes and outran everybody for a score. But it was the running he loved. The neighbors would see him waterfalling down High Street, carried by the momentum of his speed, and they'd cry out, "Going for the Olympics, Goob?" Or, "Got your eye on the world record, Goob?" And on he'd run, floating, flowing. But he wasn't running now. He was in Brother Eugene's homeroom, and he was terrified. He was 15 years old and 6'1½" and too old to cry, but tears blurred his vision as if the room was underwater. He was ashamed and disgusted with himself, but he couldn't help it. The tears were from frustration as well as terror, and the terror was different from any other kind he'd ever known, the terror of a walking nightmare. Like waking up from a bad dream in which a monster was gaining on you and breathing a sigh of relief as you realized you were safe in your bed, and then looking toward the moonlit doorway and seeing the monster stalking toward your bed, and knowing you'd stumbled from one nightmare into another, and how do you find your way back to the real world? So we're going to add a word here to our vocabulary list, and that is stalking. And this is following along behind, as if trying to catch, right? So when someone is stalking something, they're trying to catch that other thing, right? Like a lion stalking a rabbit. He's trying to catch it. And it's not a good thing. He knew that he was in the real world at this moment, of course. Everything was real enough. The screwdrivers and the pliers were real. So were the desks and chairs and blackboards. So was the world outside, a world he had been shut away from since 3 o'clock this afternoon when he had sneaked into the school. Now the world had changed, had grown blurred with days leaving and then purple at dusk and then dark. It was now 9 o'clock and the goober sat on the floor, his head against a desk, angry at his damp cheeks. His eyes stung with strain. The vigil said he was allowed to put on the small emergency nightlight each classroom was furnished. A flashlight was forbidden because it might look suspicious to outsiders. The goober had found the job almost impossible. He had been in the classroom 6 hours and had only finished 2 rows of desks and chairs. The screws were stubborn, most of them factory tight, resisting the twists of the screwdriver. I'll never get done, he thought. I'll be here all night and my folks will go crazy and it still won't be done. He envisioned himself being discovered here tomorrow morning, collapsed in exhaustion, a disgrace to himself and the vigils and the school. He was hungry and had a headache and felt that everything would be all right if he could only get out of here and run, hurtle himself through the streets, free from the terrible assignment. A noise from the corridor. That was another thing. It was spooky. All kinds of noises. The walls spoke their own creaky language. The floors crackled. Motors hummed somewhere, the humming almost human, enough to scare a guy to death. He hadn't been this scared since he was just a kid and woke up in the middle of the night calling for his mother. Thump! There, another noise. He looked with dread toward the doorway, not wanting to look but unable to resist the temptation, remembering his old nightmare. Hey, Cooper, the whisper came. Who's there? He whispered back. Relief swept him. He wasn't alone anymore. Someone else was here. How are you doing? A figure was advancing toward him on all fours like an animal. The aspect of the beast, nightmare after all. He shrank back, his skin hot and prickly like the onset of hives. He was aware of other figures crawling into the room, knees scraping across the floor. The first figure was now in front of him. Need some help. The goober squinted. The kid was masked. It's going slow, Goober said. The masked figure grabbed the front of Goober's shirt and twisted hard, pulling him forward. He could smell pizza on the kid's breath. The mask was black, the kind Zorro wore in the movies. Listen, Goober. The assignment is more important than anything else, understand? More important than you, me, or the school. That's why we're going to give you some help to get the thing done right. The kid's knuckles dug hard into Goober's chest. You tell anybody about this and you're through at Trinity. Got that? Goober gulped and nodded. His throat was dry. He was happy beyond belief. Help had arrived. The impossible had become possible. The masked figure raised his head. Okay, fellas, let's get going. One of the other fellows raised his face, also masked, and said, This is a gas. Shut up and get to work, the guy who was obviously the leader said. He also let go of Goober's shirt and pulled out his own screwdriver. It took them 3 hours. All right, we're going to add this word here, shrank, to our vocabulary. And that's going to be our last one. Shrank means to draw back, right? So this kid came into the room and he's talking to Goober. Goober's kind of freaked out and he pulled back. He shrank away from the guy. All right, now we're going to go back to our Cornell notes. And what questions might we have about this chapter? I'm going to add one more. Again, how will this relate to Jerry? And my answer is, we know how hard this is for Goober. What will Jerry's task B. All right, I want you to add 2 more questions to this sheet. Oops, sorry, I am not doing this right. No, it's not letting me do that. Okay, so add 2 more questions and the answers here, and then turn that in for this particular assignment. So part 4, I'm looking for what is occurring between Leon, Archie, and Jerry. And we've asked these questions. I want you to continue to answer them. So fill out 1. I want you to fill out 2. We already did 3. I did 4, and I want you to ask 2 more questions and fill in the possible answers. And they can be anything about the reading, but still remember that we're looking at the relationship between Jerry and Archie, and how is that going to turn out? All right, so that is part 4, and stay tuned for part 5. It's coming up soon.